Hey, fight fans, welcome back to Carlo Prusa MMA. Today we have a very special guest. He is UFC veteran, Mr. Rani Yahya. Rani, how are you doing, my friend? How are you doing on this Tuesday night?
Doing very good. Just finished a jiu-jitsu class that I was teaching.
Oh, very cool. So you've been doing this, you've been in this world of combat sports for a very long time, since the late 1990s, to be exact. How did you get into this crazy world of combat sports?
I started jiu-jitsu. I was 11 years old, and at that time was a dream for me to be a professional fighter because when I started in jiu-jitsu in 1996, the biggest achievement for a jiu-jitsu competitor, a jiu-jitsu fighter, besides being a jiu-jitsu champion, it was to represent jiu-jitsu in no holds bar. No holds bar evolved, and the sport became mixed martial arts. The Vale Tudo era was gone, and I just kept following the transitions. I started to become a professional, competing jiu-jitsu, got the black belt, compete ADCC, and when I was 18 years old, I made my Vale Tudo debut. Was still Vale Tudo at the time. I fought a guy like 30 pounds over. Was like in a ring. There was absolutely no rule. Got in the fight. I just knew that I had to go to the fight, and all I knew is that I had to go him and submit him. I didn't know any rules, if soccer kicks were allowed or not, if elbows were allowed or not. That wouldn't even matter, you know. I went to the fight without mouthpiece, without cup. I didn't know the time limit, if it was like a one round, 15-minute round, if there was no time limit, and if there was rounds or not. So, and luckily, I got the submission very quick in the first 2 minutes of the fight. So I just kept doing this.
You know, it's crazy when you look at it. Mixed martial arts 20, 25 years ago was much different than it was now. You know, you mentioned, like Vale Tudo, there were promotions that didn't have weight classes. Some didn't have gloves. It wasn't legal at all places. And now it's such this big sport that's so culturally accepted and watched by people all over the world. 25 years ago, did you ever envision this sport to be what it is today?
Um, yes, I can say yes. Because when I was young, you know, I got in a little discussions like with my parents because I started I was 11, like I said, and I was doing that. I was putting that in first place in my life, you know, martial arts, jiu-jitsu, and I kind of had the feeling that the thing was just gonna grow, you know, because every time UFC, then Pride was every fight was getting bigger and bigger. Like Jiu-Jitsu, 1 year after the other was just getting bigger and bigger, bigger. So I was expecting that was gonna achieve like the mainstream media was gonna reach the mainstream media. Was that it was the future? Yeah, that had to be the future. Like back then in Pride, the Japanese organization, they were Rickson Gracie was they were talking about $1 million fight purse for him, that he was making $1 million like back in the 90s. So that was a pretty big number for that time. Imagine $1 million in the 90s, you know. So that thing was just growing. So I kind of envisioned that a little bit.
You know, a lot of people in the United States first really got to know who you were when you made your WEC debut. You made your debut against a guy, Mark Hominick, who would go on to fight for a title in the UFC and be a very big name in the sport. You finished him off with a nice choke there, nice rear naked choke, the end of the first round. Do you remember the finish? Want to walk me through it?
Yeah, remember. That was one of my favorite fights, like because I was very well prepared. That fight I was fighting a featherweight was the very beginning of the weight class. Uh, and I could say that around that time was when I competed the ADCC 2007 and I won. So I was in my best around that time, that fight. So I remember, I mean, Hominick at that point he was already a veteran in UFC. He had the 2 wins in UFC in 2 fights. So he was quite favored for that fight and was pretty big for me that win.
How did you enjoy fighting in WEC? Did you take a lot of pride in representing WEC back in the day?
Yeah, because you see, there were so many good fights in the WC. Many champions came from the WC: Aldo Perez, Ben Henderson, Dominic Cruz, and I guess others. So was very important for the UFC. WC was very important for the UFC. Yes,
Do you remember the phone call that you got that you were signed to the UFC?
I remember. Yeah, uh, I was in the WC since 2007, and UFC was the owner of WC. So they always used to talk about like that eventually they're gonna make a transition. They would every time they would talk about that they would migrate the fighters from the WC to the UFC, the fighters who that would be with the best record that would be winning. So we were expecting that for a long time, but we were already like, okay, that's never gonna happen. You know what I mean? And then one day I saw on the internet they were gonna make that transition, and my name was there. Luckily, my name was there, or or because I deserve or something. But I was is still not too confident, that was gonna happen. And then people started to talk about, hey, you're now a UFC fighter. Now you're gonna be a UFC fighter, and I was still not very confident about that. And then at that time, I didn't used to carry a cell phone with me. I because it was a personal thing. I didn't like to use cell phone too much. I was like in the age of the rock. I used to like the phone, the regular phone, not the cell phone, the phone that you have in your home. That people nobody even knows what it is anymore. So and then I got an email uh, from a guy that I knew that's a manager, Valid Ismail, who's the Jungle Fight promoter. He's also a manager. He said, "Hey, Sean Shelby is after you. He wants you to fight in UFC. You know, do you want me to book this fight for you?" And then he booked a fight. The first fight was like supposed to be against the Korean Zombie. I supposed to fight Korean Zombie. And then Korean Zombie ended up pulling out from the fight like 4 months before. And then Mike Brown took the fight. And then I ended up fighting Mike Brown.
Was it pretty cool for you to be able to make the UFC debut by taking on a guy in Mike Brown who was such a big name WEC, former WEC champion? Was that for you a cool transition to get in the UFC and fight one of the top WEC guys as the first fight?
Yeah. Very. I mean, I would say that the biggest win I have in my career in mixed martial arts was against Mike Brown because he's a former champion. Uh, so he was a former world champion in WC, defended the title there. He beat Uriah Faber, who got to be UFC Hall of Famer, UFC title contender a few times. So it was big for me, especially the way the fight went. He was fight went was was a very good, intense fight. I won the first round. I believe he won the second round, and then the third round, I was able to win. And that fight, the place that took the fight was I forgot the name of the city. It was in Texas. It's a military city. So it was a military UFC event. Was the name of the event was UFC Fighting for the Troops. You know, so so there was no crowd there. The event, the show was only for militaries. So there was a bunch of military guys all dressed like military people, and of course they were rooting for Mike Brown. They want, and when Mike Brown got to the cage, everybody was screaming his name. When I made my walk, everybody was booing me, and I ended up winning the fight. Like I said, very intense fight. And after the fight, the crowd there kind of applaud me. So it was very big because of that too.
You fought in the UFC for a very long time. I mean, you even competed into it this year. You're talking about 14 years. In that time, you started off under the Fertitta ownership of the UFC. Obviously, 2016, they sold. The sport has evolved. The UFC has evolved. It's now so big. What's the main difference between the UFC, you think, when you first started getting into it and where it is right now today?
Yeah, after all this time in the WC and UFC, the sport made through a lot of transitions. Like I remember in 2011 when I had my first fight in UFC. Uh, People, there was like a steroid epidemic, for example. Everybody was on steroids, and when I talked to my manager and said, look, I don't use steroids, and he said, you're going crazy. You're going to a race uh, with a regular car and everybody's driving a Ferrari. And I said, yeah, but this is more important for me. Health is more important, you know. And just this is one aspect, like in 2011, 2012, for example, there was no trash talk, for example. Trash talk was not so big. I can give you a good example. You remember Anderson Silva when he faced Damian Maia in Abu Dhabi? He kind of he was vocal about what he was gonna do with Damian Maia, that he was gonna beat Damian Maia, and in the fight he kind of I don't remember exactly, but I think he kind of talked to Damian Maia a little bit in the fight. They're gonna beat. He kind of made like a scene in the fight. I think if it was nowadays, he would be very applause, or at least people will understand what he was doing. But back then, he was very criticized. And then the sport started to make the transition. Conor McGregor came to the game. Trash talk started to have a lot more space. People understand the game, how important the media is. Back in the day, fighters, they wanted to be fighters, just fight. They were not very vocal. And then 2015, USADA came to the game. So it changed the sport a lot because there were no more steroids, and the sport culture changed a lot. Also because before USADA, whoever was starting the sport, they're already building their career on steroids. After USADA, and then that culture change, that whoever gonna make his debut in the sport in mixed martial arts, they already knew that they were not be able to use steroids because eventually their dream is to fight in UFC eventually. And then Reebok came to the game. It also changed, also make a big difference. Then the company Zulfa was not suffer, but UFC was sold, and then also make a difference in the company. The sport definitely grew. It became more popular, achieved the mainstream. And technically, in the fight aspect, the sport always evolved, in terms of conditioning, in terms of technique. I remember, like, in the WC days, in training, for example, I remember that we used to train, like, for a 3-round fight, we used to do 6 rounds. We used to do double of what we're gonna do in fighting. And that was, at the time, that was the most correct thing to do, you know. And then the sport evolved. We learned that you cannot fight for train for 6 rounds, because you're not managing your energy. You spreading your energy for 6 rounds. When you're gonna be 3 rounds, you're gonna be a lot more intense. And after that, we come to a generation about sparring that you go get a good guy to do sparring with you, and you do 3 5 minute round. You get good rounds, or you divide the sparring. You do 1 round with one guy, 1 round with another guy, and then the third round you do with the guy you did before the first round, actually. So the sport suffer many changes, and evolve, uh, in conditioning, for example, before USADA, for example, conditioning was a very big thing. Was like one of the main trainings for the guy. The all the conditioning guys, the all the trainers, the coach, they used to kill the guy in conditioning. And then after a while, we started to learn that the conditioning is still very important, but you need to have a good guy who only gonna get you ready for the training, not gonna break you. That the sparring is the most important training. So the sports suffer all these evolutions.
I think a big evolution is personality, entertainment. You talked about a little bit with McGregor. The new ownership really pushes entertainment, which at the end of the day, this is a business. They want to make money. But now you have guys who they're putting on a character. They're pretending to be someone they're not, because they know it's going to make tickets sell. It's going to have them fight for the belts a lot easier. What do you think of this whole idea of personality in today's age of mixed martial arts?
Yeah. So it's like you said, the game changed. So now people, because of the growth of social media, we need to show our face. We need to communicate to the world. It's our way to communicate in the world. Imagine it like 15 years ago. Social media was not so big, so for people to have access to a person, it was on. They would have to go see him on TV, and on TV he was gonna be vocal. He was gonna do an interview, talk about his life, how he behaves. Now he can the same person can communicate every single day with their fans, by posting, by talking, doing lives, and express their thoughts, their all kind of thoughts, political thoughts, and thoughts about random things. People can show who they are, and this is show it seemed to be very important, like, because people, they can really show another side of who they are, because way before like I said that to you, one of my idols, Rickson Gracie, we could not see him what he does in his life. We only would be able to see him once in a while when he was on TV, at a very quick highlight of him training, and we would never have access to his personality. So now the fans are able to connect more with the guy. But by what you're saying, that change is very. important for the sport, because I believe that the UFC uh, is very big in social media, so they increase the guy name a lot. You go to the guy Instagram, the guy is nobody, but when he makes his first fight in UFC make him big. So it's part of the game. So the sport changed, and also the big change was to show that you to show your personality, to show how you are. And I'm not talking about that only that you have to do trash talking, not only this thing, but you you have to show a personality. You see, like Sean O'Malley, uh, of course, I saw him teasing other guys, but I think the thing that he does with his hair, the Maria Juana thing that he likes, is one personality. And then you go like to Alex Pereira, he's like that guy, like his face is like a rock, and he's like very, uh, uh, like doesn't speak too much, very serious guy. Is also a personality. People also connect with that. The guy doesn't even speak English very well. So there's space for different personalities. So you just need to know how to explore.
Of all your fights, one of the ones that always sticks out to me is the Luke Sanders fight. That heel hook, amazing finish. Walk me through that one.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was very important for me, that fight. Luke Sanders had a very good record. I think he had like one loss only in his career at the point. Now, I think maybe he got knocked out. But yeah, I was in a very good shape for that fight, very well prepared, and I got the opportunity to submit. It was something that I trained. That submission, that heel hook, was something that I trained in the gym. Uh, 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 and I also trained, for the fight months before the fight, even months before the fight was booked. Like I would say, like 7, 8 months before, I had a training session with Josemar Toquinho, Josemar Palhares. You know who he is? He used to be UFC fighter, and he finished a lot of guys with heel hooks, and he also UFC cut him because he was finishing the guys with heel hooks and was holding the guys after the guys tapped. So he was hurting a lot of guys, and UFC didn't like that, so ended up cutting him. So I had a training session with him, and he gave me a lot of clue on the heel hooks aspect. We train a few techniques, one training session, and that remained with that. I kept that in my muscle memory. And on the camp, I started to do that a lot. And when I got to the fight, I was able to get the finish. That fight was the quickest finish I had in UFC, was 90 seconds.
And another reason where the sport changed, so many people watch it now, and you have what are called the casual fan. The people who are at the bar, who are in the stands, they get drunk. When guys are doing jiu-jitsu exchanges, they might be booing, they may be saying bad things. How do you handle these people? Does it get annoying? Is it just part of it? Does the sport need these people?
Yeah, I think the sport need these people. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm not a soccer player, but as a Brazilian, I'm a big fan of soccer. I watch soccer. Uh, like on the World Cup, I watch soccer, and every once in a while, Brazil doesn't win the game, and I say, no, that motherfucker, how he didn't make the goal, how he didn't defend the goal. That guy doesn't know how to play soccer. They should put a better guy there, you know. But I bet if I was a soccer player, if I was a professional soccer player, or a professional that was involved in soccer like you are in mixed martial arts, I would have a different view. I would never talk about a guy like that, you know. I'm exaggerating a little bit because I'm still an athlete, so I don't say that about the guys. But I see people doing that kind of comment, like for mixed martial arts fighter, like this guy doesn't know how to fight. But of course, the guy who's saying that is at the bar, he's drinking a beer, and I mean, it doesn't matter for him. And to achieve the big crown, we need people like that because that the people that we want to achieve, the people that gonna watch, yeah, and gonna pay to watch, and gonna. I mean, if the world was perfect, we wish that the guy wouldn't make that comment. But so I think it's part of the game because of what I said. But we got to the sport is so big now that UFC generates so many jobs in so many different areas. Like you see Joe Rogan, for example. Joe Rogan is the voice, is the most heard voice in the planet right now. He has his podcast. He invites fighters. He invite people to talk about all bunch of things. And of course, he was a comedian. Of course, he was also he did something else in his life. But UFC is big part of that. Let's give you an example. You have a business that you're doing, interviewing people because UFC. So like jiu-jitsu grow so much is that it's probably the martial art that people most practice in the world right now, I believe, is jiu-jitsu, and also UFC is big part of that. The name BJJ, the name jiu-jitsu, every time when the UFC comment, when they comment the UFC, they talk a lot. Hey, that guy is a BJJ black belt. That was a jiu-jitsu move. So they talk about. So it achieves so many areas like trainers, coaches. So UFC made mixed martial arts so big that achieve all people in the world.
One fight that I've always wanted to see you fight against was Cody Garbrandt. Happened a couple times, just get booked. Things didn't work out for it. Is this a guy you still
Cody
want?
Cody Garbrandt, yes. Yeah, if I'm gonna tell you something that if there's something that I regret, not regret, because I didn't have a choice when I pull out of those fights, but if there was something that I could do, was definitely that fight. That because Cody Garbrandt is a very big name. He's maybe one of the biggest names in the bantamweight division. He's a former champion. That fight would be the biggest fight of my career. Would be in a UFC co-main event against a former champion. But I couldn't do that fight. I wasn't able to do because I was treating a hernia in my neck, and I had a hernia crisis. And I got to a point where I was feeling my whole body in pain the whole day. So I affected my daily life, was affecting my health. So it was something that I had to really stop and treat. The very first time the fight was booked, I got to feel the hernia and I already know what it was about. So I stopped and make a quick treatment. And then UFC called me again to the fight, and I said, okay, I'm good to go, but I wasn't 100%. And I was having a camp that I was able to deal, but 3 weeks before, a series of events started to happen. One day the guy in training tried a guillotine on me, and I resisted a lot. I didn't tap, but that made the thing worse because if you tap in the guillotine, it's because the guillotine is locked, and you tap, so you're not gonna get injured. But if you don't tap in the guillotine and you get out, okay, you got out of the guillotine, but your neck, it's not gonna be the same maybe. And then the next day I had a grappling session where people were grabbing a lot, and then the following day I had a hard workout, and then like 4 days before I was like this. I was tight like this, like uh and I couldn't train. My arm was sleepy from shoulder to my hand. So the only choice for me was to pull out of the fight because I have to take a corticoid shot to start to feel better. And then I really stopped and start to treat that thing. And then, but to be honest, at that point when I supposed to fight Gabriel, I was already 38 years old, and I already had 40 pro bouts in my career. And my first fight was when I was my first pro fight was when I was 18 years old. So already had 40 pro bouts in 20 years in my pro career. And so after that situation that happened with my hernia, I couldn't go back the same anymore. I had the fight after that against Montel Jackson, then against Victor Henry. They ended up beating me. So I was never the same after the last win I had against King Ho Kang in 2021.
Okay.
2021. Yeah.
All right, Ronnie, last question for you, my friend. What's next for you, man? What are you looking to accomplish next?
I still have a contract with UFC. I still have fights to do there, but I'm focused now on something else here. Focus on teaching on my jiu-jitsu team, my jiu-jitsu gym here. More focus on that. But if I have a good proposal there in UFC for a good fight, I'm still on it. I'm also doing some BJJ tournaments, no-gi tournaments, grappling, to keep active in case uh, there's something going on in UFC. I think there are a few fights in UFC that would interest me. That like uh, there still feel a few guys that I would like to fight. Corey Garbett is one of them. Other guy that I would like to fight is Alex Caceres, because we're from the same generation. He also been fighting for a long time, but he fights in the featherweight division. But I wouldn't mind go to the featherweight division because one thing that I don't want to do at this point is to cut weight. When we talk about cutting 25, 30 pounds to fight in the next day, when we talk about that 25 pounds is something, it's not too much weight to cut. It's because there's some insanity on doing what we're doing. So I don't want to do that weight cut anymore, to cut to bantamweight. So if there is a fight, if Cody Gabbert wants to fight me in featherweight, do a catch weight, I would do it. I would do the last fight. So that's the way I see things going on now.
Awesome. Well, Ronnie, thank you so much for taking the time out of your night to talk to me, my friend. Absolute pleasure.
All right. Thank you very much. My pleasure.
That's it. That's Rani Yahya. I'm Carlo Prusa. Stick around, fight
Thank
fans.
you, Carlos.